Honestly, looking back, it wasn't even about the gargoyles. Not really. It was about the sickening uniformity of that nauseating shade of subdivision beige that covered every single house within a 3-mile radius, and the way Brenda, the HOA vice president, squinted her eyes like a hawk spotting a field mouse whenever she saw someone daring to have a soul. It was just so incredibly, unnecessarily petty on her part. I stood on the crackling, sun-baked concrete of my driveway in Savannah, Georgia, watching 400 pounds of carved granite descend from the liftgate of a flatbed truck with the agonizing slowness of a tectonic shift. It was late July, and the air was less like atmosphere and more like warm soup you had to fight your way through, leaving a sheen of sweat on my skin that had nothing to do with physical exertion. The forklift beeped rhythmically, a digital countdown to chaos. Across the street, I could see curtains twitching in Brenda's second-story window. She knew. Of course she knew. Brenda always knew when a molecule of dust moved without her explicit, notarized permission. The gargoyle, whom I'd already named Gary, the shorter, craggier one still in the truck, was destined to be Greg, touched down with a muted thud that I felt vibrating through the soles of my sneakers. Gary was magnificent. He was a snarling masterpiece of fake ancient craftsmanship, meticulously hand-carved in a style that I liked to call nouveau Gothic creepy, complete with folded bat wings, a long forked tongue sticking out at the world, and 2 deep, hollowed-out ear sockets designed specifically to accommodate PVC pipe for drainage. Gary and Greg weren't just decorative. They were highly functional rainspouts destined to sit at the front corners of my porch, finally diverting the water that usually pooled against my foundation and made my front door swell shut every time it rained for more than 5 minutes. "Where do you want him, Chief?" the driver asked, wiping sweat from his brow with the back of a leather glove. He looked utterly exhausted, probably from navigating a massive flatbed through the winding, decorative tree-lined streets of whispering pines without clipping a single mailbox, which, to be fair, was impressive. "Just right here on the driveway is perfect, man," I told him, already feeling the inevitable approach of the HOA storm front. "Keep him close, so I don't have to break my back moving him later." I didn't even have time to sign the delivery manifest before I heard the familiar, sharp clack, clack, clack of sensible low heels on asphalt coming from across the street. Brenda wasn't walking. She was marching with purpose, clutching a laminated clipboard to her chest like a shield. She wore a visor that said, "Live, laugh, love. You'd leash your pet." A statement that didn't just clash with her current expression of pure bureaucratic venom, it actively insulted it. Brenda, in that moment, embodied neither living, laughing, nor loving. She was purely an engine of HO compliance and neighborhood aesthetic homogenization. "Arthur!" she shouted from 20 feet away, her voice carrying that distinct, annoying vibration that always made the hairs on my neck stand up. "Stop this! Stop this right now! What in the name of all that is holy are you doing with that on your property?" She pointed a long, aggressively beige fingernail at Gary, who just stared back at her with the same vacant, demonic grin. I handed the clipboard back to the driver with a smirk. "Thanks, buddy. Have a good one." I turned to Brenda, feigning complete and total ignorance, a classic opening move. "Oh, hello, Brenda. Beautiful morning, isn't it? Just taking a delivery, as I'm sure you can see with your own eyes. It's a very common human activity, usually involving goods being brought from one location to another. You should try it sometime. It's wild." Brenda was already pushing past me, getting dangerously close to Gary's granite face. I worried he might get an allergic reaction just from proximity to so much polyester. "This is a violation, Arthur.
a massive, multifaceted architectural violation of the Whispering Pines covenants, conditions, and restrictions, sections 4.1, 4.2, and definitely 6.8 regarding non-standard exterior embellishments. Look at it, it's satanic. Brenda, first of all, Gary is not satanic, I said, putting my hands on my hips, assuming a defensive parental posture towards the stone beast. He is, at best, is agnostic with some agnostic-leaning Gnostic tendencies, but most importantly, he is a water diversion solution. My foundation is suffering, Brenda. The Savannah clay is shifting my house, and the CC and Rs specifically state in section 7.4 that homeowners are mandated to maintain structural integrity. I am doing that. I am complying with the rules by making sure my house doesn't fall down into a sinkhole created by bad drainage. You could use a normal downspout extender, like everyone else, one of those nice, discreet green plastic tubes that you bury in the mulch. Brenda's voice was rising, and several other neighbors were now out on their porches, suddenly very interested in the humidity of their landscaping rather than Brenda's meltdown. They get clogged, Brenda, I explained, as if speaking to a child. What Gary here is a self-cleaning, high-volume hydraulic management system. Look at that spout. That is peak performance water flow management right there. It just so happens that peak performance looks like a 12th century French drainage solution that I find historically fascinating. Are you anti-history, Brenda? Because that sounds problematic. Brenda literally hissed, a real audible hiss of pure, undistilled HOA rage. It was fantastic. She furiously scribbled something on her clipboard, the pen digging so hard into the paper it left a physical indent. I don't care about French water, or whatever this nonsense is. This object, this monstrosity, is not in harmony with the neighborhood aesthetic. Whispering Pines is a community of consistent, high-end residential elegance. We have a shared vision of what a home looks like. And this is like a wart on a supermodel. I raised my eyebrows, totally enjoying myself. Consistent? Brenda, the house 3 doors down is painted the exact same shade of sandy dunes beige as yours. In fact, if I were to describe the neighborhood aesthetic, I would use words like aggressively boring, soullessly corporate, and aggressively committed to the architectural creativity of a wet cardboard box. Gary brings texture. He brings gravitas. He brings, I don't know, a certain je ne sais quoi that says a sophisticated vampire might live here, and you should definitely not try to sell him a timeshare. Brenda's mouth dropped open, and then it clamped shut again, forming a single, thin line of fury. She looked like a turtle that had just accidentally eaten a lemon. You are not amusing, Arthur. You are in direct, willful violation of multiple CC and Rs. That thing, that satanic gargoyle, has exactly 24 hours to be removed from the view of the public, or you will begin accruing fines of $50 per day, every day, until it is gone. And don't you dare try to install the other one, or I will have this whole street sealed off as a crime scene. Are we clear? Clear as a glass spout in a rainstorm, Brenda, I said, winking. But I think you're going to find that the fine is the only thing that's going to be accruing around here. She just glared, spun on her heel so hard she almost lost a shoe, and marched back across the street, muttering words I'm pretty sure were not in the Bible. I patted Gary on his granite head. Don't you worry, buddy. This is just the opening credits. The real movie hasn't even started. That first day, the fine notice arrived exactly at 9 a.m., hand-delivered by Brenda herself, who didn't even ring the doorbell, just slipped it under the mat like a passive-aggressive threat, which I guess it literally was. It was a laminated pink slip, standard HOA color for "You are a disappointment to the community." It cited not only the unauthorized exterior modification, but also harboring an unapproved statue, disrespectful communication with a board member, and, my favorite, creating a visual nuisance. I sat at my kitchen counter, drinking my coffee and staring at the pink slip with a kind of sick admiration. $50 a day was a lot of money, honestly, like literally a full tank of gas back when that was a reasonable thing to afford. It was clearly designed to intimidate me into immediately surrendering Gary and Greg back to the stone carver from whence they came. It was meant to break my spirit. But that's the thing about me. My spirit doesn't just break, it actually becomes weaponized. "Okay, Brenda," I muttered to the empty kitchen, the humidity already creeping in around the window seals. "You want to talk about neighborhood harmony? You want consistency? I'll give you so much architectural harmony, you're going to start hearing phantom church bells." Taking the gargoyles down was never an option. That would be admitting defeat to a woman who wears a visor indoors. But the fines would destroy me financially if I just ignored them, so I needed a bigger play, something that would render the HOA's rules completely, totally, hilariously irrelevant. And if they were going to complain about my house deviating from the aesthetic, then I would simply lean into the deviation so hard that it would become legally protected. That same afternoon, while Gary and Greg continued to grace my driveway, becoming something of a local tourist attraction, a neighbor's kid asked if they were real and if they ate vegetables, I picked up my phone and called a contractor. I didn't just call any contractor, I called Goliath Restorations. Their tagline on their website, next to a picture of a guy using a sledgehammer while laughing, was, "We make it happen, you deal with the zoning." This was the energy I needed. A truck pulled up 2 hours later. It was a customized Ford F350, jacked up on massive tires, painted a matte black that seemed to absorb all the ambient light in Savannah. The driver's door swung open, and out stepped Big Mike. He was literally the size of a professional wrestler, with a beard that could host its own ecosystem and tattoos running all the way from his knuckles to his neck. He wore a Goliath shirt that looked like it was screaming for help from being stretched so tight. He looked at my perfectly average, split-level, beige suburban house, and then he looked at me with the same look of utter, total confusion a dog gives you when you make a squeaky noise. "Are you the guy who wants to build a moat?" Big Mike asked, his voice a deep rumble that seemed to come from the ground itself. "Because the dispatcher said you were talking about moats and gargoyles, and honestly, man, I'm just confused. I thought this was a residential service call, not a request to fortify a fortress." "No moat, Mike, at least not yet," I said, shaking his hand, which swallowed mine completely. "I have a water problem, and I have an HOA problem. I need to install these 2 gargoyles on my front porch as functional rainspouts. That's the official story, anyway." Mike looked at Gary, still sitting on the driveway. A slow, massive grin spread across his face, revealing a gold cap on one of his front teeth. "Huh. You aren't kidding. Actual stone gargoyles. That's not something you see every day, especially not here in Beigeville. I kind of like them. They got character." Brenda, the HOA VP, does not agree, I said. She thinks they are a satanic affront to the neighborhood's residential elegance. So I need you to do something for me. I need you to create a framework for them that is so robust, so absolutely permanent, that removing them would legally constitute structural damage to the primary dwelling, which is against our municipal codes for property safety, so I would have no choice but to keep them, right? I want to build out a Gothic-inspired structure around the front entrance. We're talking integrated archways, flying buttresses, mock ones for aesthetic and historical value. And I'm going to turn that single front window into a faux rose window with custom stained glass of my cat. Can we do that, Mike? Big Mike just stared at me. He stared for a long, long time. I could literally see the gears in his massive head turning, trying to process the level of petty defiance I was proposing. Then he started to laugh. It wasn't a normal laugh, as it was a chest-shaking, boisterous boom that probably caused minor seismic activity in the next subdivision over. "Man, you are completely out of your mind," Mike said, slapping me on the shoulder hard enough to rattle my bones. "You want to build a church on your beige box just to piss off your HOA? I mean, I respect that so much, I really do. My mom lives in an HOA, and those people are literal vampires. They sent her a fine once for her mailbox being the wrong kind of black." The wrong kind? What does that even mean? So yeah, sign me up. I will build you a whole cathedral, my friend. We'll make it look so authentic people will start coming over here looking for communion on Sundays. He immediately pulled out a tablet that looked comically small in his hands and started sketching with a stylus. Okay, so, to make it permanent, we'll need to do more than just attach them. We need to sink footings for the arch support pillars. We'll use reinforcing rebar, tie it directly into your existing concrete foundation with anchor bolts. If Brenda tries to tear that down, she'll be looking at a fine from the city of Savannah for unpermitted demolition and structural destabilization. I like the flying buttress idea. They'll be small, decorative and attached to the roof line, but they'll be tied into the structural beams, not just the shingles. They'll have to stay. And the window, that's easy. We can just replace the whole window with a circular stained glass piece. I know a guy who does that. I was already grinning, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction. Perfect. How long will it take? To do it right, and to make it look convincingly historical, we're looking at maybe 4 or 5 days of real work, Mike said, tapping his tablet. It's going to be messy. There will be concrete mixers. There will be power saws cutting through hardy board and stucco. There will be a lot of dust, a lot. Your neighbors, Brenda included, are going to have a full-blown aneurysm. I'll buy you lunch and all the sports drinks you can handle if you can start right now, I said. Literally, right now. I want the sound of a jackhammer to be Brenda's dinner soundtrack. Mike looked at his watch, then back at me, then at Gary. He nodded slowly, that gold tooth gleaming. Well, I guess the other jobs can wait. I'm an independent contractor after all. My schedule is flexible. Let's get to work, Father Arthur. Well, we've got a cathedral to build. 20 minutes later, the peace and tranquility of Whispering Pines was shattered by the high-pitched shriek of a circular saw slicing through stucco. It was a beautiful, glorious sound, the sound of active architectural warfare. Big Mike and his two-man crew were already moving at warp speed, having loaded a small, vibrating concrete mixer off their truck. I went inside and pulled all the curtains on the front of my house, knowing Brenda would be watching with a combination of horror and glee that she finally had something tangible to use against me. She'd probably call a special HOA meeting just to show the live feed. By the end of day 1, my front facade was a mess of exposed wood framing, broken pieces of subdivision beige hardy board, and a massive, freshly dug hole in my garden bed where a concrete pillar for the Gothic arch was being prepared. Gary and Greg were still in the driveway, looking on with silent, stone-faced approval, as if waiting to be enshrined in their new cathedral. The noise, the dust, the visual horror of actual messy construction was doing exactly what I'd hoped for. It was driving Brenda and the HOA into a full-blown panic. My neighbor to the left, a nice enough old guy who just wanted to grow his hydrangeas in peace, called me 3 times just to ask if I was finding gold under the house or what. My neighbor to the right, a nervous soccer mom who seemed to be permanently vibrating with anxiety, just pointed her sprinkler at my house as if to wash the dust away, which didn't do much, really. But Brenda, Oh, Brenda. And I could feel her rage from across the street. She was calling the special HOA meeting, all right. And this time, she wasn't just bringing fines. She was bringing the full force of her manicured, laminated bureaucracy to shut me down before I could complete my Gothic affront to the neighborhood. But what she didn't know was that while she was reading bylaws, I was reading something far, far more powerful. The United States Code and the Georgia Historic Preservation Statutes. I had already set my trap, and now all I needed was for Brenda to walk right into it, clipboard and all. The third morning of what I was privately calling Operation Divine Intervention, and what Big Mike was calling the Great Beige Rebellion, dawned hot, sticky, and loud. The circular saw was already at it again, a constant, a rhythmic whine that I knew was vibrating Brenda's very soul from across the street. We were making real progress. The primary archway for the front porch, constructed of custom-milled wood to mimic ancient timber framing, was already standing, giving my house the distinct appearance of an upscale Renaissance fair entrance. It was magnificent. The stained glass window of my tabby cat, Oliver, as a holy saint, was already being installed, casting multicolored light into my entryway. It was, honestly, the most beautiful, hilarious thing I had ever seen. I was inside, going over the legal documents one more time, when the noise stopped abruptly. It wasn't the sound of a break, it was a sudden, jarring silence. I looked out the custom-stained glass Oliver window and saw exactly why. While a squad car from the Savannah Police Department was parked at the curb, its lights off, but its presence immense. 2 officers, one looking comically tall and young, the other stocky and older, with the weary, patient look of a man who has seen too many people try to commit crimes in athletic wear, were stepping out. And there, leading them towards my front door with the speed and determination of a military invasion force, was Brenda. She had her clipboard, natürlich, but she also had a copy of the Stop Work Order from the city's building department, a document that I knew she had spent all day yesterday maneuvering through City Hall to get, claiming I was, in fact, running an illegal commercial demolition. The irony of me, a grown man, trying to build something a little more interesting on my own house. My being labeled a commercial demolition was hilarious, and I, literally started laughing as I opened the door. "Ah, the Calvary," I said, putting my best innocent homeowner being harassed expression on. "And by Calvary, I mean the fine officers of the law. Good morning. What seems to be the trouble? Did someone report an excessively happy cat window?" The older cop, Officer Davis, looked at me, then at Big Mike, who was leaning on a massive pile of concrete rubble, giving them a cheerful wave with his gold-toothed smile. Davis then looked at my house, then back at Brenda, who was vibrating with barely contained bureaucratic triumph. "Sir," Davis said, his voice slow and heavy with the weight of 1,000,000 domestic disputes. "We received a call about an active construction site being run without a valid city permit, and specifically about the alleged unpermitted removal of structural walls, creating a public safety hazard. Also, apparently, a monstrosity has been installed." "A public safety hazard?" I asked, looking shocked. "Heavens no. We are not touching any load-bearing walls. We are simply enhancing the architectural heritage. This isn't just construction, officer. It's an active restoration, an elevation of aesthetic and historical integrity. Look at this wood framing. It's all custom-milled. And Big Mike, he's a professional. He knows how to not make houses fall down." "He also has a stop work order," Brenda interjected, shoving the laminated paper towards Officer Davis like a holy relic. "From the City of Savannah Building Department, issued yesterday, and it specifically orders all construction activity to cease until a proper zoning variance and architectural review are completed. This man is defying a legal order from the municipality." "Wait, yesterday?" I asked, feigning surprise. I looked at Big Mike. "Mike, did you see a stop work order yesterday?" Big Mike shook his head slowly, scratching his massive beard. "No, sir, not a one. We were busy mixing concrete and listening to that podcast about the history of stone gargoyles, funnily enough. No orders were delivered. If someone taped it to the porta-potty, I missed it." I turned back to Officer Davis. "See? This is the first I'm hearing of this. We are law-abiding renovators, not renegades. We wouldn't just ignore a official city notice. Well, I mean, like, not unless it was delivered by a neighbor with a personal vendetta and zero legal authority." Brenda's face went a color that I didn't think existed on the human spectrum. It was like an iridescent shade of pure bureaucratic rage. "I didn't tape it to the porta-potty. I had it served through the proper channels. And even if you didn't see it, it's irrelevant. The law doesn't care if you were too busy listening to gargoyle podcasts. The work has to stop, now." Davis sighed, a deep, weary sound. He looked like he would rather be doing literally anything else, including giving a cat a bath, than mediating a dispute about architectural taste. "Look, ma'am, this is a civil issue. The stop work order is from the building department. It's their job to enforce it, not ours. But unless this construction is actively collapsing onto the street or into a neighbor's yard, and unless you can show me that these people are creating a clear and present public safety threat, like, say, throwing bags of concrete at your visors, then I can't do anything about it. This isn't a criminal matter." "A civil issue?" Brenda shrieked. "This man is violating the CC&Rs of our neighborhood. He is devaluing every home on this street. He is bringing history into a master-planned community. You have to stop him." "Ma'am," the younger officer, Officer Miller, spoke up for the first time, looking genuinely amused by Brenda's meltdown. "If we had to arrest every person who violated their HOA rules, we'd have to convert a football stadium into a jail. Like half the city of Savannah would be in lockup." I started to chuckle, and Big Mike let out a loud, supportive guffaw. Brenda turned on me, her eyes practically shooting lasers. "You are not amusing, Arthur. This is serious." "Oh, I know it's serious, Brenda," I said, putting on a suddenly very serious expression of my own, the tone of a man who is not joking. "And that's why I've been doing some serious legal research of my own. You see, this stop work order that you were so keen to leverage, it's really just a delay tactic, which I understand. But the city inspector you brought in, the one who agreed that a variance might be needed, well, he also has to follow federal law, right?" "What are you talking about?" Brenda asked, her voice dropping, a flicker of something new, maybe a tiny, microscopic speck of doubt entering her eyes. "What federal law? You are not a lawyer, Arthur." "No, but I know how to read, Brenda. And let me tell you, I have read a fascinating piece of legislation called the Religious Land Use and Institutionalized Persons Act of 2000, also known as RLUIPA, 42 U.S.C. Sections 2000 ECEETSEQ. Have you heard of it?" "No." "I'm shocked. A legal scholar like yourself should have the whole thing memorized." Officer Davis, who had already been looking towards the street, eager to escape this suburban hellscape, suddenly stopped. His eyes met mine, a look of surprise and confusion on his face. "RLUIPA? What does a Federal Religious Land Use Act have to do with you building a medieval-looking porch extension in a subdivision?" "Ah, Officer Davis, I am so glad you asked," I said, leaning casually against my new Gothic archway, like I was giving a guided tour. "As part of my renovation process, I have also been going through a spiritual awakening of sorts, A rediscovery of the architectural theological foundations of my personal faith, if you will. Brenda let out a sound that was half gasp, half scoff. Your faith? Your faith is in being a visual nuisance to this entire community. You do not have a protected religious land use right to install a gargoyle named Gary on your driveway. That's where you are so incredibly wrong, Brenda, I said, shaking my head with exaggerated pity. You see, as of this morning, I have successfully and officially registered my home right here in the heart of Whispering Pines, Savannah, Georgia, with the United States Department of the Interior's National Park Service as a historic place of religious significance. And more specifically, I have completed the Georgia state-level historical landmark registration process, which is remarkably efficient when you submit a detailed 50-page dossier, prepared by me, that meticulously outlines how my dwelling is a direct and faithful reconstruction and tribute to Gothic ecclesiastical architecture. I watched as the blood literally drained from Brenda's face. She looked like she might pass out right onto her sanitized concrete driveway. You did what? A historic place of what? That is insane! You cannot just turn your beige house into a historic church. I didn't, Brenda, I said, smiling, the malice compliance truly reaching its apex. I just got the state and the federal government to agree that it is one. My dossier detailed the historical significance of Gothic design, the use of flying buttresses, ribbed vaulting, the aesthetic, and, most importantly, the religious purpose of the gargoyles as protectors of the sacred structure, serving to cast evil spirits, or in this case, aggressive HOA board members, away from the holy grounds. I even included diagrams of how the water flow from Gary and Greg creates a sanctified perimeter around my foundation, ensuring its enduring, divinely protected integrity. And since I am the high priest, sole practitioner, and supreme spiritual advisor of this specific architectural theological sect, this house is, for all intents and purposes, our personal place of worship, our sanctum, our holy ground. Officer Miller let out another low, long whistle, this one purely impressed. Whoa, that's intense, man. You got it on the historic registry? In like a day? I am a very fast and thorough reader, I said, tapping my temple. And like I said, I have read the RLUIPA statute very, very carefully. Section 2A, 1, specifically states that no government shall impose or implement a land use regulation in a manner that imposes a substantial burden on the religious exercise of a person, including a religious assembly or institution, unless the government can demonstrate that imposition of the burden on that person, assembly, or institution is in furtherance of a compelling governmental interest and is the least restrictive means of furthering that compelling governmental interest. And Brenda, keeping a master-planned community from looking slightly different, does not, in fact, what constitute a compelling governmental interest, not when compared to my now constitutionally protected and officially recognized right to practice my architectural Gothic faith, which commands me to have these gargoyles on my property for spiritual protection. Brenda was just staring, speechless for perhaps the first time in her bureaucratic life. Her clipboard had dipped, the pink fines notice fluttering in the breeze. She tried to speak, her mouth moving, but only a small, strangled sound came out. But the CC and Rs, the aesthetic harmony, we are consistent. Yes, Brenda, I nodded. You are consistent. And I respect consistency. And I'm going to be very consistent about this too. I have my official certificate of historical recognition on the kitchen counter. I'm going to have a nice brass plaque made. The Whispering Pines Gothic Cathedral of Personal Sanctuary, complete with a little picture of Oliver as a saint, which will be installed right next to the front door. And you know what the best part is? Since my property is now a city, state, and federally recognized historical landmark, I am actually required to protect its architectural integrity, which means that any attempt by the HOA or the city to force me to change the Gothic facade back to sandy dunes beige would be an act of not only religious discrimination, but also destruction of a legally protected historic site. The law, Brenda, is a fascinating and beautiful thing when it works for you, and not against you. Officer Davis, a slow grin spreading across his face, clapped a hand on Brenda's slumping shoulder. Well, ma'am? Oh, it sounds like this man has a protected religious activity and a historical landmark right on his property. As I said, this is a civil issue, but, I'm pretty sure a federal law like RLUIPA trumps your laminated list of paint colors. There's nothing more we can do here today. Sir, carry on with your wholly, historically accurate renovations. Just make sure to keep the noise down before 7 a.m., okay? Even a cathedral has noise bylaws, probably. Big Mike let out another massive guffaw, and the two officers turned to leave. Officer Miller even giving a little salute to the custom Oliver window. Brenda stood on the asphalt, her laminated vision of an elegant, homogenized neighborhood dissolving around her, while Gary and Greg, the magnificent, demonic waterspouts, grinned their stone grins. Joan protecting not only my foundation, but also my gloriously, legally protected right to be the most historically, religiously interesting person in all of Whispering Pines. Operation Divine Intervention was not just a victory, it was a crusade, and I, Father Arthur, one priest of malicious compliance, had won.